Okay, good morning and welcome to How to Create a PeopleSoft Expense Report for P-Card and Team Card programs. This morning from the Controller's Office, we have Becky O'Connell, Kathy Blackburn, Melinda Kraft, and Douglas Bailey. And then from the Purchasing Department, we have Kim Rose. And so I am going to pass this over to Melinda, and she's going to present the information this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are going to start off today with our agenda for this webinar. So today we're going to talk about the two different card programs quickly, and then we'll go into what is my wallet and how do you use it. We will talk a little bit about use tax on there as well, and then do a demonstration. And then we will explain the expense report and do a demonstration of that as well. And then at the end, we'll talk about some card violations, some notifications, resources, and contacts for you. So we'll start with the procurement card program. This is a way that you can pay for supplies, services, and fees that are under $5,000 total. It can be used to purchase things in person, online, on the phone, or by fax. And it eliminates the need for low-dollar purchase orders, blanket POs, and it also minimizes the use of payment requests. And for the team card program, this is used to make purchases for team travel expenses like hotels, meals, transportation, and gas. It can also be used for unforeseen incidentals like snacks and supplies. And this card is locked down with MCC codes that are only related to travel. So my wallet. My wallet is a page in PeopleSoft where P-Card and Team Card transactions are interfaced from the bank every day into PeopleSoft. And cardholders and liaisons can go into my wallet and review and update these charges before they bring them into an expense report. It's important to note here also that it takes about 1 to 2 additional days after the posting date of the transaction until you can see these transactions in my wallet. So if it's the end of the billing cycle and you're getting started on your expense report, right when you get your statement, there may be a transaction or two from the end of that billing cycle that may not be showing up yet. So if you just wait a day or two, you should see those come through. So how to use my wallet. The following items can be updated using my wallet. You can enter a description for each of your charges. You can change the expense type, and by doing this, it will change the GL account code so that you don't have to change that when you get into the expense report. You can also review and update for use tax applicability. You can also attach receipts here if you'd like to do that. And all updates that are made in my wallet will carry over to the expense report. Some of these you can do on both my wallet and the expense report. However, use tax can only be added in the My Wallet page. So it's important to note that if you have a transaction that needs use tax added, that can only be done in My Wallet. And while we're on the subject of use tax, most personal property, tangible property, is subject to sales or use tax. So it's important to look at the receipt or invoice for your charge and find out if sales tax was charged on the invoice. If you were charged by the original vendor for sales tax, you do not need to check the use tax button in My Wallet. So that is only for items that should have been taxed but were not, and in that case you will check the box that will indicate that use tax will need to be paid. Also important to note here, if you do check that box, you will not see the sales or use tax transactions show up anywhere on your expense report. That's kind of a behind the scenes thing that happens. But once you check that box, it does notate for our tax department to pay that to the state. So just make sure that if you're checking it, that's because it was not on the invoice but should have been. And now we will go over to PeopleSoft and do a demonstration of the My Wallet page. So in order to get to My Wallet in PeopleSoft, you'll go Main Menu, Employee Self-Service, Travel and Expenses, and My Wallet. And when you get to this page, You can hit the search button if you want to create a list of all of the cardholders that you have access to. If you don't know their employee ID, this is just a way that you can quickly find them. It will only show you the cardholders that you have been given access to. You will not see all of the cardholders, and yourself, you'll also see yourself in there. So I'm going to click on someone here. Okay, so at the top here, you will see a date range. It's always going to default to the prior year. Since you should be working on just your last month statement, you should not need to change this unless you were to just be going to look for old transactions. And for the receipt data source, you'll just leave that as it is. For the transaction status, you've got two options. You can do assigned or unassigned. So your unassigned transactions are going to be the ones you're looking at throughout the month. Before you've created your expense report, it's going to be unassigned. Once you have created an expense report and pulled those transactions in, it will then be under the assigned category. So you can use that if you want to come back later and just look at information on the charges. But when you're just building, for your next expense report, you'll use unassigned. You'll also have an option here. If you have P card and team card, you can drop this box down and select which program you're looking at. If you only have one, it should just default to that one. And for your card number, you may or may not have multiple cards shown here. If you've had any replacement cards and they've given you a new number, those will always be in the system. So you'll just make sure you're selecting the card that you're working with at the moment. And once you have all of this, you hit search, and it will bring up all of those transactions. So then you can go, if you click on the expense type here for one transaction, this is where you're going to get the page where you can make changes. So up here, you can see I have 7 total transactions. I can scroll through them using the arrows here, or I can hit view all, and then they will all show up on this page. So once you're in here, you can change the expense type, and as we said before, that is how you can update the GL account code. It, each one has a code, so you don't have to change that when you get into the expense report if you make sure that the expense type here is correct. You can also change that once you get into the expense report as well. It's going to default to the expense type that comes through from the charge from the bank, depending on the merchant category code. So, depending on the vendor, they may have something like Amazon's probably always going to be other supplies, but you may want to drill down and be more specific with it. So we will just leave that one as other supplies. You can also add your attachments here. If you want to put your receipt in there, you can click there and do that there. You can also see enhanced data on some charges. So depending on the vendor, some of them pass through this enhanced data. So you can see the total charge was $29, but when you look in here, you can actually see the detail of what that entailed. So, and just to note over here, it shows tax charge. That's not always accurate, so it's better to look at your receipt rather than relying on this over here. And over here, this box for use tax, this is where you will select the box only if you were not charged what you should have been. And once you select that box, you will have to choose an office location, which will determine the tax rate. So if you don't know your office building, you can do an advanced lookup and type in the description, or you can just find it if you know what it is. Also here, you can enter in the description for the charge, and this is a requirement on the expense report. So if you don't enter it here on My Wallet, you will be required to enter it once you get to the expense report. So it's probably easier while you're in here to just go ahead and then put that in here while you're in here. So then you can scroll down or scroll through depending on how you have the page set up to each charge. So you can go through and determine, whether the expense type is correct. You can add the attachment if you'd like to do so. And you can just go through each item as you need to. And once you are finished, you want to make sure you hit save at the bottom. And you can return to My Wallet right here. And that will just take you back to the screen that we started with. So that is everything for the My Wallet demo. Are there any questions at this point for anything we've covered so far?
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay, we will move on. So next we're going to talk about the expense report. So this is a page in PeopleSoft where the P card and team card transactions that come from my wallet will be copied in. And this can be created by the card holder or the liaison. And once again, with this, it's going to default to your USC ID, but you can search based on all the card holders that you are responsible for. When you get into this page, the first thing that it's important to note is that you select the right business purpose, because after you do that, it cannot be changed. It also changes some of the fields at the top that are required in the header. So that's the important first thing you should do when you are creating your expense report. You can use the default accounting to change the accounting lines for all of the charges. We'll show you that when we get in there. But you'll just need to make sure if anything is different, if you have charges for multiple departments or something, you need to go in and make sure those are updated, because it will be the same for your entire expense report. And you want to begin your expense report early in the month, and you can add the My Wallet transactions to it periodically if you'd like to. You also have the option on the expense report to scan at the header level if you want to put your statement and all of your receipts together rather than putting each receipt individually in My Wallet. You can do that on the expense page as well. And now we will go over, go ahead, Joanne.
So we do have a question. Should use tax be applied for educational supplies, legal books?
So I think Douglas responded on the chat, but any specific tax questions can be emailed to tax@mailbox.sc.edu, and the tax team will get back with you with an answer on that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so now we are going to demonstrate how to create an expense report. So for finding the expense report page, you'll start with main menu, employee self-service, travel and expenses. So that's going to be the same way you got to My Wallet, but instead here you're going to do expense report and then create modify. So like we mentioned earlier, your USC ID will default here, but if you are liaison creating it for other cardholders, you will select the magnifying glass and then it will automatically give you a list of the cardholders. And then you will click add once you have the correct USC ID in there. Okay, and the first thing you're going to want to do when you get on this page is change the business purpose to either P card or team card. And you'll see some of the boxes up here will change once that processes because there's different things required for the employee travel expense report. Okay, so the report description is another required field in the expense report, and we recommend using something that you can easily identify, and you don't want to just put P card expense report because you're going to have one of those every month. So something like the month and the year is a good way to describe. So up here under the quick start is where hold on, let me add My Wallet entries first. So right here is where you can see all the transactions that are in My Wallet for you. So you can do a select all if all of these are needing to be pulled into the expense report. You want to make sure that you're looking at your statement to make sure that you're only pulling in the transactions that tie to that monthly statement. You will possibly have new transactions from the next month after, if you're a week into the next billing cycle, you may have transactions that are already on here. So it's just important to make sure that you're looking at making sure that it's only the transactions that belong on that expense report and tied to that monthly statement. So I'm going to choose these. And then I'm going to hit done. And that's going to bring just those ones I've selected into the expense report.
While we're waiting, we do have a question because you're going to move on to the description field. Under the description on the expense report, are you required to list each item or can you just say supplies?
On this, for each individual expense, you would You want to be as descriptive as you can. You don't necessarily have to list each individual item specifically, but you definitely want to make sure it's descriptive enough rather than just saying supplies, because that's already going to be in your expense type. Kim, do you want to speak to that?
I was just going to say the same thing. If you could come up with something as descriptive, if you had another approver that's going to be looking at this at a glance, it's already, the expense type is already office supplies, so we are aware of that. But if it's office supplies, but it's pens, pencils, pads, you may want to include that as a description.
We're good, thank you.
Okay. So once you have all of your My Wallet transactions loaded into the expense report that you need for this statement, you'll see you can have the total will populate here. So you can use that to tie that to your statement, again, to make sure you've included everything and not put anything in there that shouldn't be. Once you have your items in there, you can change the default accounting. So if you want to make sure that all of your transactions are for the correct chart fields, you can change that here. Once you change that, it will change it for every line in the expense report. So if it's just a one line change, you'll do that in the actual, on that one expense. So if you had any changes, this is where you would do that. Okay, and also up here in the header, this is where you would attach your statement. Also, if you are not doing your receipts on each individual line, you would do that up here as well. And then, so as we discussed on the My Wallet side, the description is required for each of these. So you will have to go in and put something in this description box for each expense item. Also, I'm going to note here, so there is a credit on this one. There is a credit comment required. So if you have anything that is a negative expense, it's going to require an extra description of that. And so right here is where you would update if you just had a change for maybe the department for this one line. And this is also where you can change the expense type the same way you can do so in My Wallet. So once you do that here, you'll see, I'm just going to change it to something just to show you. So that changes the account code from what it was under other supplies. Right there. So, but you also can go in and manually change this if you don't find the account that you need under a default from the expense type. You can change that here as well. I'm just going to type, I know we said don't use supplies, but I'm just going to do that for demonstration purposes so that we have something in each box. And I'm going to leave one blank just so I can show you what happens when you don't have a description in there. So up here, you should save for later. You should do that often just to make sure you don't lose anything as you're making changes. Once you do that for the first time, it will generate an expense report number that you can use to go back and find it later. So you can see here, it's generated a report number which was not there before. So once I've hit save and I go down, it's going to turn this box red because I did not put anything in there. And then as soon as you type it, that will go away. Also, I want to make a note and show you, if you were to have a chart field wrong and you went to save, it's going to notify you of that as well, and it's not going to allow it to process with an incorrect chart field. Okay, so once you've saved it and put that in incorrectly, so unfortunately it's not going to highlight red the box that's wrong. It's just going to give you a general, something is wrong here. So this red box over here is going to indicate something in your chart fields needs to be corrected. So I'm just going to put that back like it was. So I just wanted to show you all some of the ways that, if you're getting a red box somewhere when you're trying to save, it's going to alert you to what's wrong by looking for that red box. And then another way you can kind of get a snapshot of all of your transactions rather than having to scroll and look individually is you can use this related content drop down here. And if you look for accounting details, this box is going to pop up and it kind of gives you just an easy snapshot of everything that's in there. So this is a good way, maybe if you're reviewing it, you can kind of click on this and look at everything at one time. You can also, after it's been submitted, you can see the approval history here. You can look at the enhanced data, which is similar to what we showed you on the My Wallet demonstration. And then if it was for any sort of travel-related expenses, you can see more detail there as well. So as you can see now that it's populated, it's an easy way to quickly and on one screen see everything that's in this expense report. And you can just click these 3 dots and then close if you want to remove that box. Okay, so once we've got everything in, like I said, you want to make sure you have the description at the top, the description on each line, all of your attachments need to be there, and you've confirmed that the amount ties to your statement. You can do summary and submit.
So what happens if my amount doesn't tie to my statement and I have an extra line?
So you can go back, you can actually remove lines here. So if you were to have added in an extra line, if this should have only been 6 transactions from your statement, you can click this box right here and then OK, and it will remove that charge off. So if you have, and you can see that went from 8 to 9 for My Wallet. So it'll just put it back in your My Wallet for later. Good question, Joanne, thank you. So once you go to summary and submit, you will be required to certify that you have reviewed for accuracy and that everything is correct and ties and that you are following all policies and procedures for it. Once you click that box and hit submit, that is when it will go through the approval workflow and it will then go to the next level of approver.
So we have a question. What if you created 2 of the same expense reports?
Well, once the transaction comes over from My Wallet, you wouldn't be able to duplicate that in another expense report. So I don't know that you could duplicate the same expense report as far as you know, the transactions being the same. But if you mean if you just entered 2 different ones that said March 2021, is that what you're asking?
We'll see if she comes back with a response.
Well,
You have half My Wallet transactions on one report and other half of transactions on another.
Go ahead, Kim.
no, I was just going to say the certification, and you just apply the check mark there. It's a good opportunity to just go back before you apply the check mark. It's just go back and look to make sure you have all your receipts attached and also that you have included the monthly statement.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the question about if you had half, if you have not submitted it yet, you can delete those lines from one of those and then go into the other one and add them on that one. I don't think it will allow you to delete the expense report. So what you would most likely need to do is you know, remove the My Wallet transactions from one of them so that they can all go onto on the other one. And then you probably want to change the description to be the next month, so April 2021. So then you've already kind of created and have your blanket expense report for the next month. But yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty positive that you're not able to delete once you have hit save and it's generated a number.
And the idea is that you would wait till the end of the month so that all of the transactions for that month are on the one expense report, correct?
Right, or you could go and add to the same one. If you've already created it, you want to make sure you're adding to the same one, right? But yeah, if you've done that, like I said, the easiest way is just to remove those from one and then move it over and then add it from this other one.
Becky has a question, has her hand raised.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I was just going to say there's no system check that's going to look to see that your expense report matches your statement. So if it doesn't and you send it on through and the next approvers don't catch it, it will just get fully approved and processed in PeopleSoft. The problem then is our prepaid reconciliation is off, and I don't need to go into the details of that, but I just wanted to emphasize, when I talk to my cardholders, I tell them that's really the first thing I look at as the approver, is that total matches the statement. It's very, very important. But there is no system check that's going to say, oh, this doesn't match. So if you let something go through that doesn't match, it's not necessarily going to get caught until we reconcile the prepaid, or until the next month comes along and you have an extra transaction or not enough transactions. The other thing, Melinda, I didn't know if you could show, we talked about the save for later. Can you show them? Because I get this question sometimes. The cardinals will create a report and then they don't know where to go to find it again. Is there a way you could demo that?
Yes.
Okay.
So under employee self-service, which is where we were, so we were under create modify, but instead you would go to view if you wanted to go find. Now, if you're trying to modify, you would still go to the same page. And you would just search, find an existing value over here rather than add a new. But if you're just trying to view something after the fact, you can go to the view and it's the same, basically the same screen. So you can enter in the report ID. You also can enter in a name or USC ID. So you can search different ways, but that's basically how you can go back in and find it later.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. They don't necessarily remember the report ID number.
Yeah.
So they have to go in and search, find themselves, and then find it. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And that's another way, the description is another way that can be searched. So that's another reason you want to make sure that description of your expense report at the very top is something that is identifiable. So if you are trying to go back and look for it, you can find it in there that way too.
Thank you. We do have another question. When a grant expires, it seems to no longer be there for reallocation, even if the account was good through the end of that month. Sample date 1/31/21. For instance, you can reallocate quickly on the 28th of that month for purchases from 1/1 to 1/27. But if you purchase something from the 28th through the 31st, you can no longer pick that account to reallocate when the next month starts, for example, 2/1 event, even though the 28th through the 31st purchases would show up on February's statement. What do you suggest we do? And Ms. Hope is saying, thanks in advance for your response.
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer for that. So if we can Hope get back with you, that's something I'll have to ask the grant group, because I'm just not sure about how that works on their end for the dates. So we will find that answer and get back with you after the webinar.
Okay, that's it for now.
All right, so we will go back over to our presentation. And next we have some compliance. So the expense reports must be fully approved in PeopleSoft within 30 days of the end of the billing cycle. So you have a month from that 27th or 25th date in order to create the expense report. The cards will be suspended if the transactions are not processed timely. It's really, really important for several reasons that we get these in timely. So in order to enforce that, we have been suspending cards if they are not processing those expense reports in a timely manner. Also, be sure to complete a monthly review before certifying. As Kim mentioned earlier, when you check that box, you're saying that you have checked everything. So you're saying that the statement ties to the transactions and that everything in there is accurate. So just make sure you are doing another audit and review of that before you submit. Also, please remember that expense reports are subject to external and internal audit, and transactions are reported on the Spend Transparency website. Go ahead, Becky.
Sorry. As we're approaching year end, I know y'all are all looking forward to that. That is the exception as to having some extra time. We need to get those expense reports in, by the end of the year. So that's a really tight deadline. But you'll be getting some more information on that as we get closer. So you probably remember that from last year. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, and we will move on to the expense report status. So when we created the expense report and we were just still working in it, it was in a pending status. So that means that it's being edited and modified, and it has not actually been submitted yet. Once you hit that submit button and you check the certify box, it will then be considered submitted for approval. So that's when it's in process, it's waiting for an approval of the next level. And then it's also in process, meaning it's working through that approval workflow. So those are kind of both in that same area. And then once all of the approvers have approved the expense report, it will be considered approved. And that's just for that one day. And then the overnight processing happens, and then it becomes in the paid status. The paid status does not actually refer to the bill being paid. It just means that the expense report has been fully submitted, approved, and processed, and it's in the system. So for P-card violations, if you use the P-card for any personal purchases or anything that's unauthorized, that is prohibited, as well as alcohol or any other prohibited items being purchased on the card. It's in violation if you allow another person to use your card. If you don't provide receipts to your liaison or on your expense report, that is also a violation. If you do not provide information that's requested about a specific purchase, so this goes back to the audit. If somebody needs information or purchasing asks for something, you are required to submit that timely. And you also must adhere to all of the purchasing card policies and procedures as well. Or team card violations, making a personal or non-team related transaction on the card, failing to provide receipts or documentation in a timely manner, and allowing another person to use the team card. Those are all violations of the card. And recurring violations of the policies and procedures will result in the card being revoked or even other disciplinary action, including employment termination. So we have a few notifications that go out to remind you of transactions or expense reports that need your attention. So 3 examples of that, they are sent on Wednesday of every week. And one of them is the listing of expense report approval reminders. So that's going to go to anyone that is a pending approver for an expense report that has been submitted. So the approver is getting an email every week once that becomes delinquent to let them know they need to approve that. There's also a reminder that goes out weekly for unsubmitted expense reports. So if you've created the expense report, you're working in it, but you have not submitted it, it will send you a reminder once that becomes delinquent to let you know that it's out there, but you didn't hit submit, and you need to go back in and make sure that everything's there and then submit that. The third one is a listing of unassigned transactions in my wallet. So if you just have not created the expense report at all, those transactions are still just sitting in my wallet waiting to be built into an expense report, you will get a reminder of that once they become delinquent as well. And then quarterly, the controller's office will send a notification report showing all of the transactions that are outstanding, and we send that to at the operating unit level. So that report is sorted by operating unit, and then it can expand to see each individual cardholder and how many transactions and the total amount that is due. And so for all of those, cards are suspended throughout the year if those expense reports are not processed timely. So it's important to pay attention to those reminders as they come through and get those expense reports processed. They have to be fully approved. So that means not just if you're a cardholder or a liaison, it's not just submitting it. It's making sure that it has gone through that entire approval process and that it's gone into paid status. That is what is required within that 30-day time frame. And if you need any resources for P-card, you can find those here on the purchasing website under the procurement card. And then you can see that box at the bottom that shows that's where you can find anything you need on the P-card. Also for a team card, on the controller's office website under cash and treasury management at the bottom there, you can find all the links you need for team card resources. If you need to contact anyone for P-card, you can reach out to purchasing@sce.edu. And if you have any team card questions, you can email those to teamcard@mailbox.sce.edu. And thank you all for joining us today. We will take this moment to do any more questions if we have any.
While we're waiting, Melinda, just a thank you to you especially for presenting today. I don't know how many of y'all have had a chance to meet Melinda, but she has been on my team. She's been here about 3 years, and she had the honor to come just a few months before we went live with expense reports in PeopleSoft. So I rely on her greatly for that. She really is the resident expert on the expense reports in PeopleSoft, and I really appreciate it, Melinda. Thank you.
We have a question. Will this recording be available to us? Absolutely. We will make sure to have this recording out on the website by end of day tomorrow, and that will be on the controller's office in the area that Melinda just pointed out. And then, yes, right there under webinars and training. Absolutely. Thank you, Melinda. And then we'll work with Kim to see where we would like to put it on the purchasing website as well. Any more questions before we finish up for today? All right, we don't have any more questions, Melinda.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day, guys.